So I'm going to talk with you briefly about optimizing developer workflows. And there's sort of two pieces to this. One is the theory side of how can we make developers be as effective as possible. And that doesn't matter which language or technology stack you're using. So there's going to be some of that in there. The other piece I'm going to be talking specifically about Node.js and how you can optimize your workflow with Node.js. And I also have a live demo of some cool stuff that I like to optimize my workflow with. Okay. So I've been working as an engineer, I've worked as project manager, like I've worn lots of hats. And one of the biggest things I know for me as a developer, and also when I'm wearing sort of the manager hat, is to get out of the way of developers. Nothing makes a developer happier than like 4 or 8 hours of uninterrupted development time. But that also means it's not just uninterrupted development time, but it's also allowing them to really focus on just the coding and or writing tests to go with your stuff. So one of the ways to optimize that is to be able to iterate very quickly over a same set procedure. For me, I like to follow sort of a test-driven methodology where write test for a small little piece of a module first. Then write the code, run the tests, the test passed, test the app now, and then do that all over again. And it's my opinion that the faster that you can do this process, not only will you code faster and be able to develop faster, but you're also going to have the test to go with it, which means that if you want to restructure and re-architect your code, you have the test that sort of prove this is what my code does. It's sort of almost like a contract of what your code does. I think that's really, really valuable. So that gets into sort of test-driven development. You are doing this, right? You have tests for your code, both. Obviously, if you're inheriting legacy code, you may decide you're going to do a sprint on writing tests for the old stuff. That's pretty miserable. If you're writing new code, there's absolutely zero reason to not be writing tests. I don't care if you're a one-person startup company that's trying to change the world. Someday you're going to want to change your code. The only way to sort of validate that what you've changed works the same way is to have tests that go with it. Our group, we run unit tests locally on every developer's machine after every change on a file. So if you change a single file, we rerun the test on that whole file for you. And we also we run the sort of whole test suite on a Git pre-commit hook. So every time the developer's like, oh, I'm going to commit this, here's my message, go. The whole test suite runs. The test fails, the pre-commit hook fails, they cannot commit, which also is good for butt saving of saying you can't introduce errors in the system. Now, that of course doesn't stop the developer going in and marking the test as skipped, but that's why you have teammates. Why did you skip that test? Okay, another thing in the sort of Node JavaScript world is this idea of JS hinting or linting or whatever Crockford wants you to use. It's basically a way of programmatically looking at the syntax of your code and validating it against a set of rules. In JavaScript world, in any language, there's millions and millions of different styles, how you're going to code your application. Do you have commas in certain places? Do you have brackets? Where do you have your brackets organized? That sort of thing. A lot of that doesn't really matter. It's a personal take on things. But if you're working on a team, you kind of need to agree on a style. That way, one developer can work on a module, and a week later, someone else can come into that same module and work on it, and it's like all of the other modules they've ever worked on with that team. Now, developers are not necessarily going to always agree on what those styles are. That's okay, but you still have to agree to disagree and deal with it. There's got to be one common thing across at least major subsection of your code base. Maybe if you have different applications, they can have slightly different styles. If your organization is 1,000 people or 10 people, you may have some more leeway with that. But linting can help enforce and catch sort of dumb errors, especially with JavaScript. There are things, especially if you're talking like browser-side code, this is more true. The example I'm going to throw is not necessarily valid anymore, but older versions of IE, if you don't have a semicolon at the end of the line, it can cause problems. JS linting can help catch problems like that. With our team, we run lints on every file change. So anytime you touch a JavaScript file, and you save it, it automatically triggers JS hint and it reports errors to you. Now, unlike our testing, we don't hold you to saying you must have all passing tests, because there are sort of edge cases, but we do track over time the history of how many JS hint errors or warnings we have. So it sort of keeps us honest in what we're doing. Questions so far? Okay. So one of the cooler things that I've started playing with in really just the last week is something called live reload. So for me, I'm building an application, whether it's a server-side API or sort of a whole application, a single-page app. You're making changes to CSS, you're making changes to JavaScript on the client side, you're going to be making changes to JavaScript on the server side, you're modifying your HTML. All of those changes, I find that I make my change, I save, my test run, the app restarts, I have to go into the app and refresh and try to find the right thing. Live Reload is a Chrome plugin that basically opens up a port locally and allows any other applications on your system to basically send it a message saying, hey, reload this page, or go to this page, which is awesome. Basically allows you to make your change, your server restarts, the browser will, or depending on what change, hey Adam, you can specify for your client-side code that it will reload the browser, but it won't necessarily restart your server. So there's no need to restart your server. Okay, so one of the big things to help develop productivity is having some sort of task runner. In the C world or in sort of Linux world, you've got makefiles. And makefiles are basically run a set of bash commands. They have hierarchy. Nowadays, the popular thing is grunt in the no world. People are also playing with gulp, which is a new, more streamy-based task runner. Whatever. Pick one that sort of works for you, works for your team. The nice thing is that with all of these, you can check in the script runners and the scripts that they're running as part of your core code repo, which means that any developer who pulls down this repository can run grunt or run gulp, and they're going to be running the same set of scripts across all developer workstations. So it brings you that consistency across the entire team. Another thing that we started playing with is Yeoman. Yeoman is application scaffolding. So we're finding that we're creating lots and lots of small applications. Each one does one thing. Maybe this one is just a single REST API that does permissions, and this other one does user authentication and API tokens. Each app is very self-contained, very small, but we want to be able to sort of have them all look and feel very similar. And so Yeoman is a way of sort of specifying a set of files, code structure, test locations, a script or task runners that sort of pre-initialize your application. And you can get really complicated with Yeoman of having sort of, it'll ask you when you're running a certain generator, do you want to use Mongo or do you want to use CouchDB? Are you using Backbone? Are you using Angular? I'm in the process of building one of these specifically for our application sunset. So any one of our developers who wants to create a new app that's a REST API, it's going to look and feel like all of the other REST API platforms that we've built. And now I'm going to show you this. So let's make this a little bit bigger. And actually, I can't take any credit for any of this. I stole someone else's generator, and the link is on the slide. So basically what I did here is I created this directory, I went into it, and then I'm running Yo, which is Yeoman, and I'm running this Angular full stack, is the name of this Yeoman generator that I pulled down. And I'm specifying the application as BayNode Live. So I'm going to do this live. And now it's going to ask me a serious question. So do I want to use Sass? No. Do I want to use Twitter Bootstrap? Yeah, sure. Pull this up so quick. So can everybody sort of see this? Is it big enough?
Yeah.
All right. So I don't really need any of this fancy Angular stuff. I don't need Mongo. We're just going to use something small. So it basically set up the file structure. Now it's running an npm install to go grab everything that's necessary to start and run this app. It makes my life really easy. My job's pretty much done.
So when you ran the yeoman, the first is like a configuration. The first thing you passed is like a configuration file, and the second was the name. So what were the arguments?
So with this one, I'm going to take a look at it.
The switch generator and select and install.
Yeah, so the first, so yo is the name of the command. So I installed yeoman globally in npm-g. And then I ran this specific one.
You install this to your job?
So Angular full stack is the name of this. So I installed, earlier I did a global install of this yeoman generator, which is a package. Let me make this bigger too, sorry. So I installed this, which installs this package globally across my npm structure. I went into it, and then you can run yeoman, this particular application set of scripts. And in this case, they have an optional app name, which presumably they use somewhere in their code base where they do a find replace, or maybe as part of a config file that then is then used globally. Cool, this is done. And then the next thing, they happen to use grunt. You can run grunt serve. And what this is going to do behind the scenes, depending on how you configure things, this could automatically do, it's probably ran JS lint, maybe. Just looking at this earlier. It automatically opened this app for me. Let's bring this over here. Maybe. There. And now my app is live. It's pretty cool. Brackets. And so what we can see is they have automatically configured this app to do a number of the things that I mentioned. So first of all, I think it will automatically do JS linting. So I can put something in, let's get rid of a semicolon. When we come back over here, it automatically reran JS lint. So it told me, or JS hint in this case, it automatically told me, hey, you've got a problem here. And then it automatically started the watch. So let's put this back. So it'll rerun. Great, no more problems. This page is still here. We can refresh it all day long. Now let's do something a little bit more interesting. Let's go and change. I won't go into all of the boilerplate stuff that's in here. Obviously, we're going to create a customized version of something like this that's specifically tailored to our needs. But it's a great place to start. They have on this front page, they have this list of items down here in the bottom. All of this is pulled programmatically from this exported REST API, or JSON API. So presumably they're hitting an API called awesome things, and it brings down these things, and the client-side rendering is displaying them. If we want to make a change to this in real time, so we can put in BayNode is awesome. So I'm changing my server-side API. Behind the scenes, it's going to automatically compile. It's reloaded Chrome, and now we can see that it's automatically pulled down this change. An important thing to note is that it did not, did it actually? So I think it did in fact restart, oh right, because I was changing a server side, so it had to restart the server. But if I make a change to just client-side library, scripts. Rerun this. It modified just that one script. It reran JS hint, and it automatically reloaded the browser, which you can see in console, there's the hello world. But it didn't reboot the server, so it didn't make any changes to the server side. So if you have a server-side app that takes a little while to start up, depending on if it has to talk to external services, that's a really nice feature if you're only just doing client-side development. Reload the client-side all day long, the server is happily running.
Just doing that through some directory matching, like if it's in this folder, reload it this way. And
so yeah, so in this case, so they're using grunt, and grunt allows you to define a set of directories. So in this case, they're setting up a watch directive. And so for JavaScript files, their human app is, I think, the app name that it's looking for, and then it's looking anything in scripts and then doing regex stuff. And then based on what changes here, it runs this task, so it runs JS hint all, which presumably runs additional tasks along the way.
what happens if you like put a syntax error in the server file? Because I do this a lot. Like I'm typing and saving as I go, and then my restarter sometimes crashes.
So it started up, it found JS hint complaint, and the JS hint server failed, reload libs, routes, controllers,
Looks like it's still trying to reload it.
and it looks like it's still sort of running.
And it's running the old one still?
And it may still be running the old one. Just slightly confusing to me. I would have expected it to have noticed that the server restarted. So clearly I'm going to have to go back and rework some mid-run commands, or the architecture. In theory, it should restart the app, because the server side, is this server side? Yeah, this is server side. In theory, the server side's changed, so it should at least reload the whole app. I don't know why it didn't. Sorry.
Maybe it parses it for syntax errors first and only restarts it.
That's true. It may actually, that's probably what happened. The grunt file, because it says that the JS hint server failed, and it may have stopped at that point.
Right, like if JS hint error, if it does JS hint before it tries to load the thing, JS hint dies.
Yeah, I think grunt probably stops on the first failure and then goes back to watching, and then doesn't restart.
Yeah, I actually set mine up to crash whenever I get the syntax errors, because I just figure I'm either going to see it now, or I'm going to see it in about 10 seconds when I go look at the page. So I just figure I might as well let it crash, and then I can immediately see the error and fix it.
Yeah.
Even faster, I mean, this is a little bit sidewise, but like if you have like an editor that recompile and tell you immediately what are the errors, that's you don't kind of have to run it.
Right.
The editor tell you immediately.
Yeah, I've been playing with
Right.
brackets, which in theory has a JS hint and JS lint, but hasn't, for whatever reason, in the last 2 weeks hasn't been working. So
You mean I'm actually open to that line, or?
Helps that both. We use it in our editor, so we try not to crash the server, but the server sort of like basically by the time you save the file, if it's got an error, it's like a fail-safe in case you missed it in the editor. And most of the editors now have plugins for JSNet. Like WebStorm does, I know.
Sublime Text, which
Sublime
is really
does,
popular.
yeah.
We use Sublime's my actual development one. This is my nighttime hacking one.
What is that?
Brackets,
Right.
the Adobe team. Also, this one's actually open source. Take that, Adam.io.
So grunt works pretty well. So Yeoman works pretty well if you have ready-made generators, but the moment you try to write a major portion of the grunt file, it's terrible basically, because this whole syntax, it takes a while to get used to.
I'm not
Yeah,
a
that was-
huge fan of the grunt syntax.
Right.
Jared's on my team, we tried grunt for like a small little repo, and then
This is
didn't like it, but like it was shipped, so we're like, all right, we'll leave that for now, and then we moved on to another project, and then now we're using Gulp. We're sort of playing with Gulp.
Have you looked at Brunch by any chance?
At what?
Brunch?
Brunch? BRUNCH?
Yes. So Brunch is a similar thing, but it does very specific things. So Yeoman is very generic. You can do anything in Yeoman. You can do anything in Brunch. Brunch on the other side is just HTML assembler. So it does very specific thing. It's very easy to use.
I'll include this in the notes. Thanks for offering it up. Yeah, I'm not a big fan of the grunt syntax. Like, started on the process, it was a small app, and it's like, oh god, this is gonna be painful.
Are you
So
Gulp,
you-
or-
We're now using Gulp. We originally, like, our first ever Node product we started January 2013. We actually had Makefiles. Like, it was all Makefile based, which was fine. I come from a C and C++ background, so that was normal for me. Most of our team is not C or C++, so Makefiles were sort of, Gulp's great because it is written in Node.js and it uses Node.js streams, so it's really fast if you're doing like concatenating all of your JavaScript and then minifying it and then uploading it to a CDN. That whole process can be part of your Gulp script, and it also is plugin based like Grunt, pulling other stuff. But I'm sort of find one that works for you and run with it. I don't think there's one tool that fits all. Next week there's going to be some other plugin script runner thing. What?
Yeah, it's a problem.